Hi guys, welcome back to another video, and I've had this Mcready Strat for 6 months already. So what I thought I would do is, go over how I found it over that 6 months, what opinions have I changed, a couple of subtle things that I've changed on the guitar itself. You might have already noticed the mismatched coloured switches I got rid of. But before I go on to that, I think if you haven't been seeing this guitar over the last 6 months, I'll give you some sound demos, and I'll just run from the neck down to the bridge. We'll go through the Marshall JTM, and that's going to be mic'd up with just an SM57, so that's what you'll hear. I will use my pedal board as well because, like I say, I'll just go through some of the sounds that I've been getting with this and my pedals. And then, like I say, I'll come back and share some more thoughts on the first 6 months with this guitar. So just some sound examples there for those of you that haven't been, following the guitar sort of thing. So what I'll do first is I'll bring the camera in and I'll show you what I've kind of done to this Relican up close, and then we'll go from there. Right, so just showing you up close on this guitar then. If you take a look at the Relican there, you'll notice on the edges I've kind of roughed it in and then rub some sort of graphite in there, and it just, especially sort of from a distance, it just makes the relicing kind of set in the guitar a bit better. And I've done most of the guitar, if I can, but I have got a section where I haven't yet done it, so you'll be able to see what it normally looks like. So you can see that right there is how the guitar comes. So it just looks super stenciled, and like I said on the first video, you know, I don't really rate the relicing on this guitar, but I've just sort of done what I could to kind of, you know, make it look a little bit better, and like I say, especially from a distance. And I'll show you the back. I've done the same thing on most of the back there as well. Like I said, just to make it sort of set in a little bit more, because it's very, very stenciled, and with the amount of relicing this guitar has, when so much of it is so stenciled, it's you know, it starts getting on your nerves a little bit. And then one other change, which I think has been a really good change actually, is these saddles. So I've swapped out the stock Fender saddles for these Highwood ones. And the main difference is, if I kind of come around to the side, you can see that set screw just there is underneath the saddle. It's sort of on the bottom of the saddle, rather than sort of poking up through the top of the saddle. And you've also got these kind of little grooves that keep the strings in place as well, which this guitar is quite well known for having the high E very, very close to the edge. So having that groove there, it just helps keep it, you know, that little bit closer in kind of thing. One unintended consequence though is that these saddles, these Highwood saddles, they have brightened up the guitar quite a lot, and I didn't really intend to brighten up the guitar, but it's kind of, they definitely have a different sound to the stock ones. So that's literally it. I just thought I'd show you some close-ups of it before we crack on. So as I said in the first video then, like I don't really rate the relicing on this guitar. So all of that was, as the kind of weeks and months were going by, it was annoying me a little bit more. So I was just trying to figure out, you know, what can I actually do with this to make it, you know, just that little bit better. Because it does look okay from a distance, and not even that far, maybe a few feet away. But when you're the player, you're right on it, sort of thing, you know. And over time, like I said, it was just starting to bother me. So I definitely think it's improved, but ultimately you can't really improve a relic job that isn't that great to begin with, sort of thing. In terms of the guitar itself, though, so normally when you've spent, you know, a lot of time and you've purchased something and you live with it, your opinion to what it was when you first got it to then what it is 6 months later very often sort of changes. But in this case, everything I said on the first video with this, when I first got it, it's basically stayed the same. So I'm kind of recapping what I said before, but one thing to bear in mind is that before I bought this one, I seriously looked at, I think it was 8 or 9 other Mcready Stratocasters that were available, you know, at the time. And from that, I learned absolutely, even at this price point, you do not want to order one of these just blind off the internet, because across the 8 or 9 I looked at, you had issues like, well, weight for a start. There was like a £2 difference, you know, in variations constantly. The fretboard itself, that some of them had nicer rosewood, others not so nice. I've mentioned the high E string, but some of them were like not even remotely on the board whatsoever, kind of thing. So there was all these kind of little issues, and it, you know, at this price point, you would think that there would be some kind of consistency to them, but there just, in my experience, there just wasn't. So you've definitely got to make sure that, you know, you're doing your homework before buying one of these. You can't just trust that whatever one you order will show up absolutely fine. So that's definitely one thing to take away from it. And I already spoke about the relic and stuff like that. But there's two things that this guitar, if you're interested in one of these, buy it for these two reasons only, I think, because otherwise there's other better guitars at this price point. But the first thing is the neck carve. So I have played quite a few sort of 60 to mid 62 Fender Stratocasters, and the neck on this is the closest to those I've ever played on any other Mexican guitar. The fact that it's slightly, well, noticeably skinnier and thinner in the sort of first 3 to 4 frets, and then it just gradually widens out, thickens up, and it's just very, very similar to a real early 60s, Stratocaster. The only thing that's different is up this area here on a real early 60s one, this sort of transition to the headstock is very much so, you can tell it's more of a hand done thing. The transition, you don't get this kind of velouting, whereas on this you can tell it's not a real one because the carve here is different. But the neck itself is very, very similar, and you do not find this neck on any other models. And then the other thing is the pickups. Now, at the time when the Jason Isbell Telly came out, I said the same thing about that with the pickups on that. And Fender did make those pickups available separately later on. And I strongly suspect that Fender are going to do the same with these Mcready pickups. So, funny enough, my most viewed videos on the channel, which is mad to me, and they still get viewed today even though they're like 3-4 years old, are videos where I shoot out Fender pickups. They're my biggest videos I've ever done. And the 5762 set in that time always won. They're the pickups that I like the most. But these Mcready set, whatever they are, it's just a Mcready 60 set. I don't know the full details of them, but they are now my favourite Stratocaster pickups. I think each and every position is like ideal Strat territory, and I'm sure the fact that they've got good wiring, paper and oil caps as standard, CTS pots as standard, I'm sure all of that helps the pickups sound this good. But at the current time, these pickups are not available in any other Mexican guitar. So for me, the neck combined with those pickups, because they align with my idea of a Strat so well, despite this guitar's faults, the inconsistency across the models, the pretty poor relic job, it's still, for me, worth it. Now, it's probably worth bearing in mind that I didn't pay full retail for this, which does help because the full retail on this is even harder to justify. It is an expensive guitar. But if you're into one of these and those two things, the neck shape and the pickups, are like your number one, I would absolutely say this guitar is worth it. So, in terms of my favourite ever guitars to come out of Mexico, this is sort of up there with, the top of the line Mexico kind of things. But I would still say my absolute favourite guitars to come out of Mexico are those early 2008 to 2010, say, road-worn Stratocasters, where you had the similar kind of aged nitro finish, you had rosewood, you had jumbo frets, you had, I think, Fat 50s is possibly, or Texas Specials I think they came with, but you had like custom shop pickups in it. And those guitars were just unreal, and at the time they retailed for around £800, I think, was about the new retail, so a lot less than this thing costs. And I have heard that Fender, now they're back on rosewood, and they've done runs like the Andertons run at Christmas that we just saw, that spec of road worn is actually coming back to the Mexican Fender, offerings, should we say. But it's going to cost around £1,400 this time round. So reasonably similar price to this thing that you can get now. So, it's absolutely up there with my favourite guitars to come out of, Fender Mexico. But I do think if you can get those old road worns, because if you're after this kind of battered 60s sounding and feeling vibe, that's essentially what those early road worns were. And they were done extremely well, sort of thing. So, it's a close tie between those two guitars for my favourite ever Mexico Strats. But that's kind of, where I'm at with this guitar. So, like I say, normally I would have changed my mind over the 6 months, but everything I kind of said the first time round has held up, and I still sort of think the same now. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you are looking at getting one of these, hopefully this kind of helps you out a little bit. And that's it. So I will see you on the next video.